undemocratic governments like Russia, elections don't matter because Putin will always win. For representative democracies like the US, elections matter because they are the main way for citizens to participate and hold the governments accountable. What are midterm elections? Midterm elections in the United States are the general elections held near the midpoint of the president's four-year term in office. The next midterm election cycle is in 2018. Federal offices that are up for election during the midterms are members of the United States Congress, including all 435 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, and the full terms of 33 or 34 of the 100 seats in the U.S. Senate. At the same time, many states will pick their governors, who serve 4 years. Some states will also elect all the other statewide officers who serve underneath the government, such as the Secretary of State, Attorney General, and Lieutenant General. So why do midterm elections matter? Midterm elections usually have a lower voter turnout than presidential elections. While general elections over the past 60 years have had turnouts of about 50 to 60% over, only about 40% of those eligible to vote actually go to the polls in midterm elections. This statistic is alarming because congressional elections are just as, or arguably even more important than presidential elections, so voter turnout should be higher. The result of the midterm elections determines who controls almost all of an entire branch of government, which raises the stakes for both Democrats and Republicans. In large part, the outcome of congressional elections dictates how much of the president's agenda can be realistically accomplished. The president's party wants majorities in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, so the president's legislative agenda has a greater chance of being passed. If the president's party does not have a majority in the House and Senate, passing effective legislation becomes incredibly difficult due to imminent gridlock. In general, a midterm election is also a good measure of the public's approval of the president. The immediate impact of this loss of majority is clearly evident in Obama's attempt to nominate a new Supreme Court justice to replace Antonin Scalia. The president has the power to nominate a Supreme Court justice, but requires the approval from the Senate. As a Democrat, Obama had the power to nominate a liberal justice to replace the conservative Scalia. This would have allowed for a more liberal interpretation of the Constitution, thus drastically influencing future rulings for decades. Republicans delayed approving Obama's nominee, waiting for the election of a new president before approving any nominee. France is an ideal country for comparison because it shows how the timing of midterm elections in respect to presidential elections affects incentives to vote and media coverage for candidates. In the U.S., elections for congressional representatives are held in every even-numbered year, on Election Day, the first Tuesday after November 1st. All House representative seats are elected each midterm cycle because House reps have 2-year terms. However, a senator's term is 6 years, so only a third of Senate seats are up for re-election each term. France, on the other hand, a democratic semi-presidential system, has something similar to midterms. They elect the 2 houses of the French legislature, the National Assembly and the Senate. The National Assembly elections take place every 5 years, 2 weeks after the presidential election. The most recent agreed-upon term limits for senators are 6 years, so half of the seats are elected every 3 years. Unlike the US, France's Senate is indirectly elected by local politicians. The National Assembly and both houses of the U.S. Congress are directly elected. However, most states have primaries for congressional seats in order to pick a candidate for each party. Since congressional elections in the U.S. are during presidential terms, these elections are seen as a reflection of the public's opinion of the current president and provides candidates with more media coverage. In France, legislative candidates get less media attention because they compete for attention with the presidential campaign. Overall, in the U.S., Congress holds the president accountable in that congressional members are elected during a president's term. However, in France, the president and the French Congress are elected at the same time, such that voter accountability does not exist in the same way as it does in the U.S. In this way, the U.S. system of midterm elections is more receptive to public opinion, so take this opportunity to vote. Your voice matters. Using your right to vote is how you can affect change by holding people in power accountable for their actions and voting for people who represent your values and beliefs. Some important positions up for election are governor, all House representative seats, and a third of Senate seats. The results of these midterm elections will heavily impact national policy decisions. So vote in the primaries on May 22, 2018, and vote in midterm elections on November 6, 2018. If you're not registered to vote and you are a U.S. citizen, register to vote by visiting www.mvp.sos.ga.gov.